Hi, Emma. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us today. I think you're the only person joining us because other people are on vacation and have exams. So we're very excited to talk to you about this article.
Yes, me too. It's a really interesting. I've been trying to eat more like probiotics and like kimchi and things like that. So this was really a useful article.
That's awesome. And it's great that you're trying to implement it into your life. I think that's very excellent. Okay, so I shared my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's get started. So first thing, what are two things you guys learned from the article? I can start. So, one of the things that I learned is how important the gut microbiome is for our health. And I was honestly shocked, and I learned that gut microbes can actually influence blood pressure. I had no idea that that was a thing, but apparently it can regulate hypertension through like molecular signaling. So I found that to be pretty interesting, especially because hypertension is a big issue in a lot of conditions such as diabetes.
I always knew that people say things about the gut and how important it is and it can affect your mood and things like that. But I didn't, it was like Mika was saying, with these more serious conditions like cancer and different types of diabetes, I didn't realize it could affect something that big. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you guys for sharing. And I definitely think the gut microbiome is so important to talk about. One of the things I found to be very interesting from the article was a medical procedure called FMT, which is fecal microbiota transplant. Did you guys read about that? I think I saw it, but I didn't really understand it the first time I read it. But if you understood it, feel free to share. I'd love to learn. Sounds good. Yeah, so I was reading about FMT because what I understood from it was that medical professionals can basically get poop from a person and be able to filter it, purify it, and then input the gut microbiome from that person into a more sick individual. And so I have a note on this because I found it to be very interesting. And so it's a medical procedure where processed stool from a healthy donor is transferred into the gut of a sick person. And it involves stool, but it is done in a very clear and controlled way. So it's not just like a healthy person's poop is going in the stomach of a clean person, which is what I initially thought, but I'm so glad that's not the case. And so basically it's done in a controlled setting, so like colonoscopies and edemas, capsules. And so it's fascinating because it shows success in treating infections such as the C. diff bacterium infection, which is basically a bacterium that causes inflammation of the colon. And so the FMT procedure is only used in severe cases, but it's really cool because it's being explored for conditions such as inflammatory bowel disease, as well as some neurological conditions, which I found to be very interesting. And I also have a video on it. So if you guys are interested in learning more, I have a TED Ed video on it. Do you guys want to see it?
Sure, yeah, that sounds interesting.
Awesome. Let me share my screen. Oh, I'm sharing. It's very interesting that you mentioned that. And my question to you is, what made you feel the need to research all of that? Was it the name that you were unfamiliar with, or yeah, it was definitely the name because I was like, fecal microbiota transplant. Does that literally mean transferring transferring the microbiome from one person's fecal matter to another person? And I was like, that doesn't seem to be that healthy. But then I realized that it's purified and cleaned and everything. So it's actually a very interesting process. And yeah, can you guys see this TED Ed video? Yes.
I can see it.
Awesome. That's perfect. And by the way, this video we did not make at all. TED Ed made it, but we're sharing it for educational purposes because I think it does a really good job on explaining. So let me just mute myself and share the video.
1700 years ago, a Chinese alchemist named Gi Hong was renowned for his special soup that could cure diarrhea-stricken patients. The stew was deep yellow and had an intense aroma. And like many family recipes, it had a secret ingredient. But in this case, that ingredient didn't come from the kitchen. It came from the bathroom. It might seem unwise to consume feces, and today there aren't many doctors who would prescribe Gi Hong's recipe. However, exciting new research suggests that taking poop into the body in other ways might benefit our health. One such treatment is fecal microbial transplantation, and the secret to how it works lives in your gut. Trillions and trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and archaea consider your bowels their home. Collectively, these microbes make up what's known as your gut microbiome, and each of these organisms possesses dynamic, specialized abilities that seem to be essential for human life. They break down our food, make vitamins, train our immune system and circadian rhythm, and even protect us from infections. In return, they receive a nice warm place to live, complete with an all-you-can-eat buffet. Some research suggests our microbiomes might start forming in the womb, but if not, they certainly get started when we're born. During a vaginal birth, infants take in some of their mother's fecal matter and microbe-filled fluids. From then on, our microbiomes are constantly diversifying with exposure to various foods and environments. This is essential for maintaining gut health. If poor nutrition, chronic disease, or antibiotics disturb this delicate balance, the body can become vulnerable to problems like bacteria and fungal overgrowth or infectious diarrhea. But infusing a new batch of microorganisms into the intestine seems to help reset the gut microbiome. This is where fecal microbial transplants come into play. This line of treatment is still very new, and there are tons of unanswered questions about how it works. So currently, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration only allows doctors to use fecal transplants experimentally for battling one of the toughest gut infections, antibiotic-resistant Clostridioides difficile. This infectious bacterium forms spores in the colon that are immune to antibiotics and very difficult to destroy. Patients dealing with this infection can experience months of intermittent fevers alongside bouts of abdominal cramping and extreme diarrhea despite antibiotic treatment. So when symptoms get this bad, it's time for a fecal microbial transplant. To start the process, a gastroenterologist first retrieves some feces, typically from a stool bank. These frozen samples are particularly impressive number twos. The selected donors go through a strict process to ensure their samples are infection-free. In fact, these protective protocols are so stringent, one prominent stool bank's acceptance rate is less than 3%. Next, the gastroenterologist gets that sample inside the patient via a pill, or more commonly, a tube into the stomach or colon. Finally, the transplanted microbes migrate through the tract until they find the colon, where they quickly multiply and displace the infectious invader. This process is so effective that it cures over 80% of patients in just one treatment. Because each stool sample is unique, the FDA still classifies fecal transplants as an experimental treatment rather than a formal medication. But promising research in rodents suggests new ways we might use fecal bacteriotherapy in the future. For example, fecal transplants from non-diabetic mice improved insulin resistance in mice with type 2 diabetes. Similarly, some studies have shown mice exhibiting anxiety and depression become calmer after transplants from their less anxious peers. Scientists studying humans have even started finding different microbial patterns associated with various intestinal, autoimmune, oncologic, and even psychiatric disorders. So it seems entirely possible that altering a patient's microbiome could allow for multiple new modes of treatment. We still have a lot to learn about what makes the best gut microbiome or the most beneficial fecal transplants. But for now, at least we can say that our feces have a bright future. While we can't control all the factors that go into maintaining a healthy gut microbiome, what we eat has a big impact. Find out the best foods for a healthy.
That was really interesting because the rate of success was 80%, which is really high, and for something that was so untreatable. So that's really interesting.
I agree. And I really love this topic about learning about the gut because I know Avani and we interviewed a lactation counselor a few months ago who was talking about the importance of having a good gut. And so this is just like such an interesting topic. And Avani, thank you for sharing this interesting transplant technique. But yes, I think that's super interesting. And so I guess we can go on and discuss some questions we had. So, do you guys have any questions that you formed after reading the article?
I had a question about the bacterial nomenclature. Um, the there was, mentioned here the C. diff bacteria, and that was obviously a bad bacteria. But um, the article mentioned names of good and bad bacteria, and I'm curious if you can tell just by the name, if it's a good or bad type of bacteria, like if there's a certain prefix or suffix that they use.
That's a very good question. I'm trying to go to that page. Um, oh, was that something that was mentioned throughout the article, or was that?
Yes, it's more just a general question for all types of bacteria.
Oh, well, that's a really interesting question. I'm not super familiar with microbiology and how bacterial nomenclature is, but I feel like a name is basically assigned to a bacteria, and then based on that, scientists can determine if it's from like a good family or if it's from a bad family, especially because I know that from the name you can get the like family or the species the bacteria is from, and I think that they have similarities, but I would definitely have to do more research on that. Yeah, that was such a great question, Emma. I had to search this up just now, but from what I'm seeing on Google, the name of a bacteria is given by the genus and then the species. And so I think with the name, you can't necessarily figure out whether it's a good or bad bacteria, but I do think like certain species and genuses of bacteria might be more good or bad than other types. And so maybe you could kind of figure it out that way. But I think in general, people probably need to search up whether a bacteria is good or bad. But that was such a good question. I wish there was a way where you can look by the name of the bacteria and try to figure out if it's a good or bad bacteria. That's very fascinating to me. Great question. Okay, and then another question I had was, so I was really thinking about this after reading the article, and I was thinking that with people who have chronic disease conditions such as diabetes or cancers or heart diseases, I was wondering how effective you guys think having a personalized diet based on the disease would be. What do you guys think? Because I know the article talks a lot about how diet and the gut can really influence the whole body. So I would love to hear what you guys think about that.
I definitely think that would be helpful if, everybody could have their own individualized diet plan, because it also ties back into the last article we read about the cruciferous vegetables, and those helped with certain conditions. And then these, the bacteria help. So if you had a diet strong in probiotics and cruciferous vegetables, it really seems like that could help. people get better.
I completely agree with Emma. And I also do think that since every person has a different gut microbiome, then it might be actually very interesting to get like personalized treatments. As I know, for instance, the gut microbiome, I think it mentioned in the TED Ed video that based on your method of delivery, like delivering a baby, whether it's C-section versus vaginal, that can result in like a different gut microbiome, which I found to be very interesting. And so I feel like these different mechanisms of getting the baby, as well as different environmental conditions, basically would really benefit from personalized treatments for these different diseases. That's very interesting. Yeah, maybe one day dietitians and nutritionists can be working much closer with doctors and nurses and medical professionals. I don't know if they're already doing that, but I'm not aware. So I feel like it could really make a difference in people's lives if there's more collaboration happening. And I just find it so fascinating. I'm still just so dumbfounded by how important the gut is and your nutrition is to everything. It's just so fascinating to me. Yeah, I was surprised from the TED Ed video also that the gut microbiome through like FMTs might be able to help people with anxiety and depression. And so I wanted to ask you guys what you guys thought about the connection between the gut and the brain. Because I do think I read about the gut brain axis. And so what do you guys think about that?
I haven't done a lot of research into that, but I do think it's interesting, and I wonder if it has something to do with, if I think it did mention the bacteria being able to break down things the human body couldn't. So maybe you can get energy from that you wouldn't able to ordinarily get, and that can help your brain. Or just not having the excess waste around can also be helpful.
Yes, I definitely love that observation, and I'm still so shocked about how connected different organs of the human body are. Like, who knew that the gut and the brain would like talk to one another and communicate? It's just so cool. And Bhumika, do you have any thoughts on the gut-brain axis or anything? I'm looking at the article because I did not do much research on the like connection between the gut and, the brain and neurodegenerative related diseases, so that's why I'm looking at the article. But I'm just trying to think, do you guys think it's related to signaling, or do you guys think it's because if the gut has unhealthy microbiome, like an unhealthy microbiome or like no balance, do you guys think that maybe it's like a disruption in signaling that results in neurodegenerative disorders or, conditions like anxiety? That's what I'm trying to think about. I'm not really sure.
Like it's not allowing it to function properly due to the gut system not working. It can't connect to the brain fully.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, but it's definitely a very interesting topic. I would love to learn and research more about the specific mechanisms by which the gut connects to the brain, just because that's not something I really know about. So, yeah, I definitely think certain diseases, such as maybe like type 2 diabetes, can be caused, well, not necessarily caused, but I feel like imbalances in the gut microbiome can definitely lead to an environment that is conducive to type 2 diabetes and other dietary diseases like that. As I know, many people with type 2 diabetes perhaps don't have the best diets, hence being high blood sugar. And so maybe getting an opportunity to improve on that balance of the gut microbiome might actually help with type 2 diabetes. Who knows? I think it's very interesting though. Yes, and I'm actually looking at the article, and on page 8, it talks about how, um, let me get the right quotation. Yeah, so it talks about how there have been a few studies that have basically linked diabetes to the intestinal microbiota systemic alterations. And so it talks about how whenever participants or patients have had a shift from a low-fat plant polysaccharide-rich diet to a high-fat, high-sugar diet, then the microbiome composition changed rapidly. So, yeah, I definitely think that there's a huge link between the gut microbiome and diabetes. That is really cool to me. But yeah, did you guys have any other questions before we discuss the figures? One, oh, sorry, Emma, were you
You,
talking?
you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. So one question I had for you guys was, do you guys think that probiotics should be considered essential medicines for restoring the gut microbiome and balance, especially after antibiotic use? What are your thoughts on that?
I think so. And I know in the past when I or somebody in my family has taken antibiotics, they say to have different probiotics, but it's interesting. It's stressed after taking antibiotics, but it really should be stressed all the time that it's good for your microbiota.
I agree, and I'm just another thing, this is kind of unrelated, but I'm just impressed at how well, again, I'm impressed at how much nutrition plays a role, especially because we've been reading a lot of articles about how you should have cruciferous vegetables in your diet, how you should have probiotics in your diet. And I feel that people don't understand how important it is, especially because it's just like food, but it's like food as medicine. I just think it's really interesting. But yes, I also agree with both of you guys about how probiotics should be essential medicine, but also just advocated as a normal part of your diet. And yeah, I think it would be really cool if we're able to disseminate this knowledge, maybe through like an article or, an infographic. Because I just feel like a lot of people need to know about this, but it's just not widely understood. Yeah, I feel like many people kind of rely on antibiotic use, but the thing is antibiotics can like wipe out your whole or a majority of your gut microbiome flora. And so I really think probiotics can help you build your gut microbiome back up as well as a balance. And I think that's very important, especially because medications and everything are being so widely used. And yeah, I think it's very important to restore that balance in the gut. Do you guys have any other questions before we move on to the figures? Okay, perfect. So let's move on to the figures. Okay, here's figure number one. And so how about I give you like 30 seconds to look at it and then we can discuss. Okay, has everyone had a moment to take a look at the figure? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That's perfect. Emma, would you like to start the discussion off?
Okay, sure. Um, well, first, I think this figure shows two different things. On the left, it has different um, common bacterial strains, and I believe they're the good bacteria strains from what we've read in the article, but it also shows where they're found. And I'm guessing where it has the exponents, it's how prevalent they are per milliliter. And then on the right, it shows when the different gut axes are in dyssymbiosis, um, the different negative diseases that can come from that.
That's a wonderful explanation. And while you were talking, I did have a question. I'm not sure if you guys know, I don't know, but whenever it's talking about the exponents and then after it says CFU, do you guys know what CFU means? Perfect. Let me search that up. Oh, okay. So CFU means colony forming units. And so, yes, you're perfectly right. It's talking about how, like, it's basically measuring how much of the viable microorganisms there are in, like, food, for example, or in this case, the gut. So that's very interesting. But yes, and I would also like to add that I'm just, it's so awesome how the gut is connected to, how many is that? Like 10? At least 10. There are like 10 different axes that are connected, and this this figure is also really cool because it talks about how whenever there's a, as you said, there's a disbalance, what's it called? Disruption. Whenever there's a disruption in the microbiome of the gut, then it has just connections to all of these sorts of diseases. That's insane. Like it talks about how, for example, in the gut-lung axis, for example, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So that's really interesting. And I know that a lot of these diseases are super prevalent. And so I wonder how effective it would be if people just were able to implement more probiotics, for example, and see how much of a change would they have over the time. Yeah, I find it utterly unbelievable how there's so many ways that the gut is connected to the various organs. And Bhumika, I counted 12, so you were very close. But it's just crazy how like the gut has so many implications, and I guess that's why a disruption in the gut microbiome can actually cause environments that are conducive to all these sorts of diseases. I was also shocked to see like autism, schizophrenia, and again like anxiety, depression, as well as like a gut reproductive axis, as I kind of understand why it would cause it, but on first thought, I did not know there was that much of a connection. But I find that to be very, very impressive, honestly. And it shows the interconnectedness between the organs in the human body. And so I think a main takeaway from this is to make sure to keep your gut healthy. Anything else you guys want to add before we move on to figure two?
Well, I just think it's interesting with a lot of these diseases and conditions that, like, if you were to go to the doctor for them, the doctor probably wouldn't ever mention like taking probiotics. So you'd be given a medication, and of course, there's a time and a place for medication, but I feel like it should be more of a last resort, and like think you should focus more on like fixing your body instead of just adding to it. So I definitely think there should be more of a focus on, like you said, healing the gut.
Yeah, I think having more education on these topics would definitely be helpful. And I also think, for instance, whenever doctors prescribe medications and antibiotics after major surgeries, for instance, how detrimental that could be to the gut microbiome through dysbiosis, and then the interactions between the different organs can cause harm to the different organs. And so that's kind of interesting to note how medications can have different interactions and reactions with the body due to all of these 12 gut organ axes. I agree, and I do want to add that I think it's really interesting that if there's a patient who goes to a medical professional, for example, and is like, I'm having heart problems, for example, then I feel like the medical professional may not always be able to understand the underlying cause, or at least an underlying contributing factor could be the gut microbial balance and just the entire environment of the gut. So I think it's really interesting. And another thing, this article was really just an eye opener for me just because I feel like whenever we think of an unhealthy gut, the main things we think about is digestive issues. But now we know that it's far more than digestive issues. It can actually impact all facets of your life. So I think I feel like the authors did a really good job making figure one, and I think it's just really eye-opening. Yeah, one quick question I have for you guys about figure one is why do you think they used these straight arrows for the left part of the figure and then these dotted arrows for the right part? Do you guys think the authors were trying to indicate something? Yeah, I wasn't really sure, so I wanted to see what your thoughts were.
It could just be they needed two different types of arrows, but it could also be like the for the arrows that are a solid line, like those are the things that are definite and like almost a certainty, but the ones with the dotted lines, like it's not a certainty that you're going to get these diseases if you take care of yourself. So it's like dotted to show that it's n not a certainty in a way.
That's a very good point. I definitely agree with that. And Bhumika, do you have any thoughts on that? I agree. I think that the solid lines, at least on the left side, indicate location, so a certain place, as Emma said. And then on the right side, the dotted lines, they are indicating interactions, maybe, or maybe signaling. Just I feel like it's establishing a connection, but it's not saying that the gut microbiom's located specifically in those areas. So I think that the dotted lines just mean a connection. But
I
great
see.
observation. Thanks for answering my question, guys. Okay, so I can move on to figure two. Let's see. Okay, perfect. So I've just opened up figure two. What do you guys think or observe about it? I think that this figure is a great continuation of our discussion of the previous figure, especially because it's talking more about, the gut, the axis with like the connection with the gut and then other parts of the body. Except I think the only difference between this one and the last one is that the last one talked about dysbiosis and a disruption, and then this figure is talking about eubiosis and balance. And so I feel like this figure is talking about if you have a balanced gut microbiome, then on the left side you can see all of those different benefits that you get, such as immune response regulation and less gut inflammation.
I like how this figure shows like the upregulation and downregulation of certain things, like the inflammatory mediators are down, but vitamin production is up. So I like how it shows that compared to the other figure.
I definitely agree with you both, and I definitely see from this figure that a balanced gut microbiome has so many benefits, such as immunity, and as Emma said, vitamin production, it facilitates digestion. I also found insulin sensitivity to be interesting because this kind of makes a direct line towards a balanced gut microbiome being able to help in diabetes, which I found to be very interesting. I also thought it was really cool because it said pathogenic colonization decreased, which means that the gut microbiome, although it's made of various, like bacteria, for instance, it also has a protective effect against pathogenic bacterium and viruses, which I found to be really interesting as well. Do you guys know what epithemia means? I do not either.
I was looking, I know there's a word in here, epithelial, and those are the cells that line different organs, and it's like a layer of tight cells. Um, yes, I think it was on this page, it mentioned epithelial cells. So I'm wondering if it's the lining of the gut.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think Bhumika, you might be searching it up. Yes, I am searching it up, and I actually think that's a typo because I searched up on Google and it's only showing results for epithelial. Epithelium. It's not saying anything about epithemium. So I think that's actually a typo. That's great. No passing judgment. Typos always happen. I just find it interesting. But yes, Emma, I definitely agree with you and what you said. And another thing that I saw, antioxidant production, and I would love to take this moment to connect it to our previous article. And so I find it interesting how a healthy gut microbiome ends up increasing antioxidant production, and that's going to reduce oxidative stress. Do you guys remember what oxidative stress is? Okay, perfect. Yes, Emma, do you remember what oxidative stress is?
I remember it was bad. I think it's when the oxygen, I don't remember the exact mechanism, but I know it produced chemicals that I think they help produce the ages, and it wears down the body over time, and
Yes, you
it's
got it
not good.
perfectly right. Yes, and yes, so oxidative stress, Avani, I believe that's what your research is on, right? Do you want to explain what oxidative stress is? Sure, yes. It was my 10th grade research project, and so I think I have a decent understanding of it. And so, oxidative stress is an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants. And free radicals are basically these reactive molecules, such as reactive oxygen species, ROS, and that can cause a lot of pandemonium in the human body, such as the exacerbation of various diseases, the accumulation of ages, as we discussed in a previous article, and it is very deteriorative for our body. And so you guys were on the right track, but that's like a more formal definition. Yes, and because there are more antioxidants produced, that means less oxidative stress, which means less inflammation, less ages, and everything. So it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Connecting everything we learned in Journal Club together. It's coming perfectly together. I love it. Yeah, I love the intersection between biology and chemistry, as well as the different interactions between the organs. Oh, and by the way, guys, we have a minute left for this meeting. So, does anyone have any closing remarks or anything else they found interesting? I'll probably have to pause you guys when it gets to 10 seconds and then we can close it off. I think a lot of the things we've learned in Journal Club so far and this article is to eat healthy because having a healthy nutrition can be so beneficial for our life and it can prevent us from having really bad diseases. And so I think it's just really important to eat healthy probiotics, cruciferous vegetables. Yeah, and anything you want to add, Emma?
No, I agree with that. Yeah, my family has always tried to eat healthy and eat the whole foods, and yeah, it's cool to see how it connects with the science now, the scientific articles.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, bye, guys. Thank you for coming, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.